India is globally celebrated as the world's largest democracy. That title carries an inherent promise that the hundreds of millions of people participating in it have access to a free, robust, and independent press. But in June 2023, during a joint press conference at the White House, a Wall Street Journal reporter tested that premise. She asked Prime Minister Narendra Modi a direct question about the rights of religious minorities in his country. Modi defended India's democratic values, but almost immediately after the press conference concluded, that reporter became the target of a massive, coordinated online harassment campaign. Driven largely by the Prime Minister's supporters, the attacks focused heavily on her heritage and religion. That aggressive backlash against a single question is reflected in a much larger systemic trend. This chart tracks the World Press Freedom Index. By 2026, India's ranking plummeted to 157th out of 180 countries. To put that drop into perspective, that places India below neighbors like Pakistan and Afghanistan, places that do not claim to be thriving democratic states. So how does a democratic government systematically dismantle its free press without officially declaring a state of emergency? It executes a highly coordinated three-part playbook. For decades, Indian media organizations maintained a strict Chinese wall, an ethical barrier ensuring the business interests of the corporate owners remained completely separate from the journalism of the editorial board. Over the last few years, that wall has collapsed. Billionaires with close ties to the ruling Bharatiya Nyaya Party began acquiring massive stakes in the country's news landscape. Mukesh Ambani, for example, took control of 72 different television channels across the nation. Similarly, billionaire Gautam Adani executed aggressive takeovers of news networks NDTV and The Quint. Prior to his acquisition, these networks were widely considered the last bastions of critical television reporting in the country. The editorial impact of these acquisitions is immediate. When the editor of Outlook magazine published a cover story scrutinizing the government's pandemic response, his corporate owners fired him that exact same day. This consolidation has created an environment critics call Godi Media, or lapdog media. In these newsrooms, investigative reporting into government policy or corporate fraud is strictly prohibited to avoid threatening the owner's other lucrative business interests. When state-aligned oligarchs control the distribution of information, the news is restructured to ensure the political survival of the government rather than the public's right to know. But corporate buyouts cannot capture every outlet. Independent digital platforms and foreign press bureaus remain. To manage them, the state deploys the second play: legal weaponization. When the BBC aired a documentary examining Prime Minister Modi's role in the 2002 Gujarat riots, the Indian government responded within weeks by sending tax department officials to raid the BBC's offices in Delhi and Mumbai. For domestic journalists, the legal tools are even more severe. The UAPA, the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, was drafted as India's primary counter-terrorism law, yet the government has repeatedly used it against reporters. The founders of the independent digital platform NewsClick were subjected to mass raids and arrested under terror and conspiracy charges, simply for operating a newsroom critical of the state. Framing journalism as a financial crime or an act of terrorism serves two distinct functions. It bankrupts independent outlets in endless, costly litigation, and it destroys the credibility of the reporters in the eyes of the public. The final play targets the individual. Recently, India enacted Section 152 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. While the country's official sedition law was technically removed, legal experts note that Section 152 functions as sedition repackaged. It criminalizes speech deemed to endanger national sovereignty and carries a penalty of life imprisonment. Law enforcement is already using it to summon senior journalists, like Karan Thapar, for intense police questioning. These high-level legal threats are matched by ground-level harassment. State-backed trolls routinely target critical voices, publishing their personal data online and coordinating severe death threats. Combining the threat of a life sentence with orchestrated digital mob violence serves a specific purpose. It isn't intended to punish one dissenting voice. It makes the entire profession of journalism far too dangerous to practice. Inside the newsrooms, the psychological toll is mounting. Facing a constant barrage of corporate censorship and state intimidation, a growing wave of young reporters is abandoning the mainstream media industry entirely. Their frustration is rooted in a simple reality. If writing about government overreach or corporate monopolies is strictly forbidden, their daily work holds no democratic value. This leads to the Playbook's ultimate victory: systemic self-censorship. The most critical, necessary stories in the country are no longer killed by editors because reporters know better than to pitch them in the first place. This quiet erasure allows the leadership to maintain the global optics of a free democracy, completely bypassing the political fallout that would come from an official public ban on the press. A democracy relies on the unrestricted flow of truthful information. This coordinated effort to silence dissent dismantles the foundational pillar of the world's largest democracy.